Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Green Living Chats podcast. We are your hosts, Daniel Hagen and David Ewusi Mensah. In this episode, we continue our discussions on the dilemma of the graduate with Dr. Desmond Anim. Here we share experiences of transitions between academia and industry. Dr. Anim also shares his unique experience about his transitions from academia into industry and then to policy making, and how these different sectors do in fact benefit from one another. So if you happen to be at this stage in your career, this is certainly a must listen to. And if you're not, well, lessons here can be learned to be helpful for others you may know. We invite you to join us in this conversation. Here we go. David, you have been in industry since the first day of your nursery school. Do you have anything to add to this? Because you have been also dealing with students coming in to your company to intern and other things. I mean, building on what Desmond said, where do you think is the place of a rich academic experience in industry, and then sort of also the trade-offs? Do you have any sort of words on that?
Yeah. I mean, even aside all these things, I think we've been having a lot of discussions about industry and academia and how we could actually bridge the gap so we could have more communication happening. In a very perfect world, that we shouldn't actually have that kind of challenge when industrial players are moving into academia or academia moving into the industry, right? Because I think we are both literally solving the same problem. So let's take example as maybe environmental engineering problem like solid waste, right? People in academia working on solid waste, people in the industry working on solid waste. But then those in the industry rely on the data from and the results from research to sort of deploy their sort of projects and technologies and all that. But then when the researchers go in to identify the problem, they look at it from a more research perspective, and then they present the results to the industrial players. And someone else, a third party, comes to interpret the results for the industrial players to deploy the technology from pilot scale upwards. And right. That's not supposed to be the case. So, I mean, the academic players just feel like, yeah, we've done our part and that's it. The follow-up will be when industrial players have a problem, then they come back to them again and say that, yes. So that follow-up and that connection is where the problem is. And I see this all the time. You have it very clearly from people who are interns coming into the industry to sort of deploy something. I'm facing this currently with one of our interns. So this lady finished university for a couple of years, hasn't had any industrial experience. And so we decided to make her a technician for a project that we just deployed. And there is nothing, I mean, this even project shouldn't even be part of our company. But then this lady has been given this chance to sort of move forward. And it's become the same trend. Every time she has to sort of report like how researchers report to their lecturers. And there is no sort of independency in, okay, I take something from papers, I take something from researching, and I have to make it look like physical, bring it into the ground. Let us see how it looks on the ground. That's where I think researchers find in the problem. But I think this challenge will always persist if we don't improve the communication between the two. So whenever I see researchers or people in academia, I think I had a bit of a taste of academia because I had to help some of my colleagues, PhD students and master students, deploy their research, guide them through other research. And even in my company, we are still doing researches. So I feel like that taste of academia really helped me to understand the problem of people in academia right now. I will say that when you're communicating with any project or whatever project that you find yourself doing, I think that you should look at the application level more than just the results, just deploying it. Because I think, Daniel, we've had this conversation a lot of times where we are asking PhD students or even master students, how does your project look in on the ground? How would you translate this to someone to just understand from a different industry? That has always been a problem. So that communication needs to go on a little bit more. And then I think, just like Desmond's situation where he had no idea he'll be diverting into the industry, I think there is a reason why most lecturers and most people in academia have like a little bit of a part-time job, either doing consulting or probably doing research for companies. And that helps you to even have conversations that industrial players can even understand you, because it's literally English, but then what you're speaking is trying to talk to them in principles where they could sort of understand. And
Yeah.
so I will advise people in academia that whilst you are in academia, is good. It's a perfect industry. You can do whatever you want and go on with your projects. But it's always good that have something on the side, or try to bring some communication between what you're doing in an industry. And it could be as simple as start consulting. That is one of the easiest way that people in the industry, people in academia can use
Mm.
to sort of
Yeah.
get themselves in the industry. But communication is really, really important, I think.
I think I totally agree with what David said. And hey, like I said, I mean, when it comes to transitioning from academia to industry,
Mm-hmm.
right, it can be both exciting and challenging, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can because and one of the main, challenge, especially when it comes to transitioning, is trying to adjust to different goals, right?
Yeah.
Because
Mm.
the primary
Yeah.
focus, the primary focus is often on
Mm.
research in academic research, do research, get the results,
It's the
publish it.
beginning.
Yeah, do it. Okay, this you do your research, you get a publish, you publish it probably in academic papers or whatever, which nobody may even read it. They,
Yeah.
even the key players in the industry may not even know it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've had that experience before where like working in the industry, sometimes we have a problem, and because I've been in the academic environment, I'm like, oh, I think there's this research. I remember there was one project that we were working on, right? And we did a work for a client to be able to get a permit to build some stormwater management infrastructures, right? So wetlands and other things, right? He was going to develop a wetland and bioinfiltration system. And the assessing authority came back and was like, okay, there's an issue. And the issue that we've picked up is an issue of base flow, all right? And I'm not going to get so technical to explain what base flow and all those kind of stuff is, but technically what they mean is that doing during raining season or during winter or during like when there's a lot of rain, the wetland is going to there's going to be a lot of water for the plants and everything, right? But during the dry season or during drought and everything, right? There's still the plant still need to survive to be able to do the work of accumulating nutrients and other things from the water, treat the water and all those kind of stuff. But if the plant cannot survive, they can't do the work, right? So the council was like, how are you going to manage to make sure? Because looking at the location of the project or the site, how are we going to manage during dry season to make sure that there's enough base flow coming from the subsurface, from the
Mm.
groundwater to be able to,
Yeah.
you know, and we needed because when the client submitted the work that we did, that was the query that came from the assessing authority.
Mm.
And they're like, we knew that it's not going to have any issue, right? Because of the way that we've designed it, right? But you can't just say that, oh, it's going to work, right? Just accept it. No, you need to back it up. Right. So I remember one of my so there was we were discussing it and one of my supervisors was like, we're thinking about it. I'm like, I know there's been a couple of research that has been done, regards to base flow, right? And I think I can fish that one out. We can look at it and we can use that argument from that research, because that was a research that was done in Australia, right? That we can use. So me having that knowledge and that understanding of what is being done on, in research, I was able to bring that one up, right? And we were able to cite it. Okay, we use the findings from that paper, we added it as part of our, recommendation or implication of the work, and we cited like because of the design, how we designed it, and because of the location, blah blah blah. This work says that this and that, and we were able to cite it, and we gave it to the client. The client returned it, and it was accepted, right?
Wow.
So that is also something that we, if that's one of the transition experience, or we were able to adjust to different goals, right? Understand that the primary focus is research and publishing, but you can still transfer those skills, right? And sometimes we don't think about it that way. We're like, they say that I don't have the experience, but the ability to be able to say certain, nah, yeah, I don't have the experience, but I can, these are transferable skills that I can bring on board, right? Because industry, the emphasis in industry, is mostly on product development,
Yeah.
innovation, solving specific business problems, right? So
Yeah.
they are very specific, right? Very, very
Yeah.
specific, very thematic. This is what we are doing, right? But research, you kind of delve into different areas, so being able to adjust those things and being able to sell yourself in those ways is also a way to be able to transition, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Another, I think another is transition experience that I can talk about is our ability to be able to adapt to corporate culture. Very, very important, right? Industry, from what I experienced, and everybody would tell you, is a faster pace, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Environment,
Yeah.
faster paced environment compared to academia. Very, very fast paced environment. You know,
Yeah.
you when you can, research, you may have time to adapt. Okay, you may be researching on a topic for 5 years. you know, and you have time, take your time, do your research, come up with findings, and it doesn't matter. I remember one of my papers that I wrote for my PhD, out of my PhD. And for me, it was a big learning experience for me because my hypothesis and everything was not substantiated, right? I came like, oh, what I was expecting, to happen, the results was the opposite. And I remember I was sitting in my office. I was so worried. I was like, how? Then I remember I had a talk with my professor. I was like, is, did you, so I remember what he told me, like, did you follow the right methodology? Did you do everything right? And this is what you got. So it is what it is. That's what you have to present. For me, I thought it was negative result, right?
Mm.
So, but in the industry, a client has a project. This is what I need. You've gone to the client, you've tendered for it, you say that I can help you to get a result. You can't go back to the client and say that I had negative result. No, you can't, right?
Yeah.
You say that you're going to do the work, right? It may not be perfect. Okay, the results may not be perfect as the client expected, but you need to be able to produce something at the client, right? And that is something that we also need to adjust to, we need to adapt to, right? And industry fast pace, its results is so much results oriented, right?
Mm.
You don't have time. Okay, do this. Because in a week, when I was working in the industry, in a week, I may be working on 5 different projects, right? 5 different projects. Work on that, work on that, work on that, work on that. Right. So every now and then your mind is switching. Okay. Your mind is switching every second. Every now you may be working on this project. You think, okay, today I'm working on this project. A client will just call you. What is happening with my work? They're like, oh, okay.
Oh,
You have to shift gears, start thinking about it because you're giving the client a deadline. You've taken his money, right? you know but research oftentimes, I mean, sometimes you may find yourself working in different projects, but typically the projects are long-term projects, right? Very long-term
Yeah.
projects. You can rely,
mm.
do collecting data and everything, but for industry, very fast paced. So that's one of the things that oftentimes when we come, it become a shock for us, right?
Yeah.
It become a shock for us. So we need to be able to adapt to those kind of structures, and
Oh my.
I think he has really highlighted some really, really important points. And I just want to come back to the money aspect again. So most of the time in research, you apply for grants and you get the money and start the project onwards. So in the industry, if you have an investor, the investor is waiting for his or her returns. and you're supposed to work towards that. And you as a company, probably you have a product, you want to get to the point where the product can get to the market, get it sold, and then get your profits, save them, give the money back to the investor so that you could also be able to get other investors or sell your shares to other people. And
Wow.
then now get back to the baseline, start scaling, and then now making profits.
Mm.
So the goal there is, of course, you want to make an impact, everything, but you have people working for you. You need to pay them. That's more from, let's say, a private sector industry, but I think it's probably a little bit different from the policy and government sector. So you see the big difference here that money could probably be the ultimate target because at the end we need to make profit.
Mm.
So you go to people in sustainability or even companies trying to come in with circular economy stuff, projects and all that. Yes, we want to save the environment, but we need to make profits. That is always a target. Why do you think we are not able to cut down carbon emissions and all these things just today? Why are companies not stopping all these, whatever things at once? Because there need to be a strategy that will balance
Yeah.
money, income, inflow, and stuff like that. So I think that academic people in academia can actually be very, very, very good in the industry. Looking at the things that Desmond was just mentioning, they can actually be very, very good if they just learn those principles in the industry because they are way ahead of the industrial players when it comes to where we start from. Because in the industry, we start from research, but it's very basic. So it's until we get stuck at a certain point, then we go back to research to look out for what did we miss. We'll cite 1 or 2 points from papers, and the rest are probably some people don't even know where to get papers from, right? As simple as getting papers, they don't know how to get where to get papers from. They just read those medias that kind of summarize newspaper
Yeah.
research papers and stuff like that. Yeah, like there was this research paper published by Washington newspaper, but that's not a journal, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
these are the things that are people in academia have over them, and they can do
Mhm.
deep research in a very short time and come up with a conclusion that will save the industrial players several months or several weeks of work. But then
And a
if they
lot
are
of
able
money
to
too.
understand and
Yeah.
money, yes, and so if they're able to understand those principles in the industry, then I think the transition could be a little bit easy. And just like
Exactly.
Desmond was saying, you still took that short time to prepare all that report, but then they were just looking at, so should we go ahead with the project or not? But then you gave them like a whole number of pages and they were just looking for you to do all that for yourself and present them
Mhm.
with a very maybe 2 page or 1 page technical report. So I think
Yep.
that it still goes back to that communication. But I think this conversation we're having is not to tell people in academia that they are not good enough for the industry. I think they could be very, 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 very good players in the
Yep.
industry if they just understand the other way. I'm sure
Yep.
it's the same thing for people in who have been in the industry for a very long time
Mhm.
and want to go and do a master or a PhD to get
PhD.
senior roles in
Yeah.
their companies. They
Yeah.
also go through the same transitions because it's super difficult for them to do research
Right.
because they think they have so much experience in it.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, we have to fix the bolts, like it has to go clockwise. In the lab, they are doing it clockwise several times, but it's not working. Change it a bit, and they want to pour oil on it. Maybe you need different materials. You need to go back and read papers, but they have the experience with mechanical tweaking here and there. They don't want to read the papers. So that is also the challenge for them as well. So I think we need to have, common grounds where communication happens. And for me, I will honestly be very, very grateful if there are platforms where the industry and the academia could actually work together. So that's why I really like PhD programs that are very like industrial because they can actually help PhD students to learn more about academia to really fix problems that are very, very specific in the industry. Because I think right now we need such pace to be able to solve most of the problems that we have in the industry and also academia as well.
Yeah, that's very important. That's very, very, very true. And I always say that one of the things that I found, based on personal experience, is that PhD students or researchers, you know, oftentimes when we think about transition ourselves to the industry, we are not able to sell ourselves well, right?
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
because there's all this, talks and conversation out there that, oh, you are just highly specialized in, or you have expertise in just one field, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we allow those things to just kind of like cloud our mind, and sometimes we kind of sell ourselves short. We think that, oh, maybe they are right, right? But there are so many transferable skills that we can bring to the industry, and a wide range of them, right? Even our analytical and problem solving skills alone, our ability
Yeah.
to be able to think about a problem, design, conduct, and try to think about ways to be able to undertake, or tackle that problem is something that is usually very highly valued in most industry, right?
Yeah.
Most industries. So it's all about what you look at. Sometimes there are some of the industry players that requires very, very specialized knowledge. And if you think that you want to apply for those ones, then I probably go for those ones, right? Because like I said, PhD researchers or researchers, we can sometimes be very highly specialized, right? We focus on a very narrow topic within a very broader field. And that's what we've
Yeah.
been spending all our life doing, right? The field is very broad, but our research was very narrow, right? So even though we may have a very high depth of expertise, but usually they may not always align with the needs of the industry roles that are out there, because those in most oftentimes those industry roles requires a broader skill set and very interdisciplinary knowledge. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. So sometimes we don't have that we are not very interdisciplinary when it comes to our knowledge and skill set, right? And that is not that's no fault of ours, because you got a project. The project was like, okay, try to help us to understand the impact of urban development, urbanization on water quality. And you spend 10 years or 5 years just researching on that. And all of a sudden you have to go and work for an industry that is not only they get a project. The project is not only thinking about what is the impact of urbanization on water quality, but it's also about the water ecology, the water had, the totality of the whole freshwater system. And they've employed you as their water manager, right? And they're like, oh my goodness, my specialty is in water quality. Now I have to think about ecology, Now you're like, oh, okay, the urbanization will have impact in the water quality, but no, okay, then when the quality of the water is not good, then it's going to impact the organisms and the impact. But I don't know the ecology side, right? So and I had that experience, right? I had that experience where I went on project, and because I only have my expertise is on one area, but most of the project comes and you have to bring so many skills together to be able to do it. And sometimes that's where we fall short, right? That's where we fall short. So it's very important that even when we are still working in academic, we should try to, expand our skill set, right? Look at the area that you are working on, look at the topic that you are working on, and try to understand where does this topic fall, okay? In what broader field does it fall, and what are some of the things that I need to be able to understand. And you can know this when you try to network, like David said, you try to network with industry players, try to help. So when an industry when a certain industry bring you a project, for you to research on, you know try to work with them and try to understand, okay, so these findings that I've given you, how is it going to, what are the implications on it, right? Try to get that knowledge from them too, because it's very, very important for you to understand that, so that when you find yourself transitioning,
Yeah.
you're able to understand that you can align yourself with that need, because the industry need, they want people with broader skill sets, right? They are not necessarily looking out for people with specialized skill, unless you kind of like look out for only those kind of industry. They do only one thing, right? Just one thing and one thing only, which usually you can't
It's
find
rare.
that,
Yeah.
right? It's very rare. Yeah, it's very rare. So that's also one thing that we need to understand, that typically the way we are trained, and it's no fault of ours, but the way we do our things as researchers, oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes we are very narrow focused, right? And that's what industry people And you hear a lot of industry people say that, oh, forget them, this PhD guy people, they just only know one thing, just one theory, right? Bring them to the field and they'll be found wanting, because there are so many things that are working together, to bring about that problem. And sometimes we don't have that interdisciplinary knowledge, right? So it's very important for us to, you know, develop that kind of skills, right? Develop that kind
Yeah.
of understanding, because it's very important.
All right. My goodness, this conversation is getting so nice. Desmond, if you could just make one comment before we move to our shout out. You are now in policy making as well, right? And really, I think the biggest struggle is language, right? It's language and being able to be a chameleon in all these. And I mean, I remember when in the last 2 years, putting in applications here and there, I realized that when I prepare my CV for any application, I never use the same CV twice
Mm,
because I always have to look at the job requirements and then tune my CV. So there are sometimes I'll move my teaching experiences up to the top
mhm,
so that they see it first, and then also change the language a little. And sometimes I move it way down. Sometimes I don't even want to include it because it's not about that. Here in Belgium, there's this new wave of project funding, which is now there are two types. One is called Science for Policy, and the other one is called Policy for Science.
mhm.
And the idea there is to help us to bridge the language. And with your experience in these three sectors, what do you think like policymakers are now looking out for? How can researchers and those in industry help to properly communicate to policymakers?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Daniel. And I mean, we all know that there's often a mismatch between researchers, who are doing or who are developing knowledge, and how that's inform the policies that are often formulated by policymakers, and then the implementation of that by consultant, right? So it's kind of like a triangle, right? We have
Yeah,
researchers developing the knowledge, and the understanding and the findings and all that. We have policymakers at one end who are going to take that knowledge to help inform or formulate policies, and we have consultant or industry players who are going to implement, right? Going
yeah,
to implement that, right? And
yeah.
there's always that mismatch. And I remember one of the key things that helped me to get my current job was, obviously the fact that I have that all this experience working as a
Yeah.
risk, but one of the key things that I remember when I got a job, my boss told me, because I asked him, I was like, oh, what separated me from my other competitors, right? Because
Nice,
obviously I'm not the only
nice.
one that applied for the
Yeah.
job. And that was something that someone told me, that anytime that you get a job, ask that question. That always
Mm.
ask them,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
separated you? Why did you get that job? You want to know, because it's very important. Along the way, it's really going to help you, uh, so I asked him that, what, like, oh, your research background. And for me, I thought it was even my industry background, right? And
Mm-hmm.
my local government, yeah, all those played a part. But he said that one of the key things was my research background. I was like, oh, okay, what is it about? Like, one of the things that now, as policymakers, that we are very, very keen on is to make sure that whatever policy development, okay, or whatever policy proposal that we bring forward to the government, right, we want to make sure that it's research based, right? It's
Thank
informed
you.
by
That's very
current
good.
research,
Yeah.
right? And understanding what is the knowledge out there, right?
Yeah.
So that was one of the main things that they look at my research and are like, I can help in that area, right? I can really help in that area, so that anytime that we formulate policies, we can look at, okay, what is the knowledge out there, all right?
Yeah.
Especially for my field, water, climate change, looking at water resources and all that, formulating policies, to safeguard our water and all those kind of stuff. We need to be able to understand what is going on there, especially right now with the current wave of climate change. We need to understand what are the impacts. Whatever policy that we're going to put, what are the impact? Have we taken into consideration climate change? And so you're like, we need somebody in here who can help us, who have that background, to be able to kind of connect the dot for us, to be able to help us
Mm.
to understand what is the new findings out there. What are the researchers saying about climate change? What are the research saying about urban development impacts? Right? Because those are the two key factors. Development is rising quickly. Climate change is also, you know. So me having that kind of capability was very, very key for them. And that would have been something that I would have never thought of, right? Because I'm
Mm.
like, okay, yeah. But that was one thing that they were talking about, and or my boss talked about that, so that whenever we present something to the decision makers, right? And when I say decision, I mean the senior bosses in government, because they are going to they are going to endorse it, right? Endorse the
Mm.
policy. If yeah, they will want to know. We can tell them that we didn't just come up with it, right? It's
Mm.
something that there's research, okay? There are theoretical framework that we can, give to back why we are making this decision, right? And that is going to help the government a lot, because if the government goes out to the industry or tell them that, okay, henceforth we need to change the way we do things. You can't do this again. You can't do that. You don't want to feel like because you are the government, you are the boss. You can tell them
Yeah.
that this is the knowledge that we have. This is what research is telling us.
Yeah.
These are the findings out there. And that is why we as a government, we think that we need to make this policy. And that has been something that we do all the time, right? Like we keep increasing the requirements for, especially typical example, water quality. In the past, we'd be like, okay, this is the requirement, but now we change it, right? They say, okay, now we can't do this. Now you need to increase it. Now you need to make sure that it's at this quality, right? Before, when it comes to water recycling and that stuff, and all this thing is based on what research is coming up with, right? Flood modeling. We used to do flood modeling at a certain point in time, they're like, okay, the requirement is this. When we do the flood modeling, whatever it says, now you need to include climate change, right? You need to develop climate change scenario. And in the past, you just do like maybe 10 years from now, 20 years, 50 years from now. Now we are going into 200 years from now, right?
Mm.
So you do climate change scenarios, right, in flood modeling, and you tell us that okay, 200 years from now, this is what the data is showing, that the hydrological change or the hydrological pattern is going to be this way. Have you incorporate that into your strategy to manage water, to manage flooding? All right. And having that knowledge base, research base helped to formulate those policies. So the authorities now don't just come up and say, okay, now we say this now, but they've been able to kind of coordinate. So there's that kind of coordination, there's that kind of collaboration, right? To help the industry to be able to understand, okay, these are the new wave of knowledge that is coming up, and this needs to inform your innovations or your
Nice.
technology development, right? So the academia having that uh, an understanding will provide that kind of scientific background or
Background. Yeah.
foundation for every policy that comes out there. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
one of the essential things. Yeah.
That's very. I'm very happy as a researcher. I'm very happy to hear that because you know, like I was in Brussels for a meeting, Belgium's climate action conference, and between our sessions there was a skit, a performance, poetry mixed with dance, and the one who was performing, I think she was probably an art student somewhere, and she said something like, "The forest is dying, and I don't know why." And I was expecting her to say something, or she said, "But I'm going to shout. I'm going to cry about it." I thought she was going to say, "But I'm going to learn because I don't know." When she said, "I
Mm.
don't know why," I thought she was going to say, "I'm going to learn why this is happening." But she didn't say. She said she's going to shout about it, and I was like, "Wow, that's very unfortunate." Like crying out without the knowledge. It's and I was like, yeah, I hope that this is not how the policies are being made, that, we are shouting out the problem without the knowledge,
Mm.
because sometimes when we do that, we end up shouting the wrong problems, tackling it in the wrong way. So I got very, very disinterested in the rest of the program. Yeah.
But Daniel, you
Uh,
raise a really important point, I think. And
yeah.
I think this is also the reason why I think that kind of communication needs to go on.
Right.
among all the industries in there. So I think I was actually going to share a brief example of how policymakers are also involving researchers within the space. So I think, Daniel, I told you about this. So currently we are working for the Ghana Standards Authority on a new standard they are trying to develop here in Ghana. And on a normal day, they just, I mean, standard boards had their normal way that they, all policies, all standards, sorry, they've been developing from the past. They just have their own researchers do everything and then, come up with the final drafts. They do public hearing and then that's it. But then this year, they had the World Bank coming in and they advised them on get consultants to do the project, to do everything, prepare the draft, send it
Mm,
to you for review, and then we'll have like a general national technical committee to sort of question the draft. And then afterwards, we are done. This was really interesting because they came in for thorough, like typical researchers. So the main contractors were actually researchers from Spain. And then we came in as local researchers and subcontractors to work on this. And throughout the process, we actually deployed like typical academia research, going to do like data collection, going to the grassroots, collecting data, looking at the state of the art, looking at literature, what has been done in Europe, what has been done in the US, in Asia, in Africa, and then
mm,
put all together and pick out the best practices and put them together with how it happens in Ghana, and then which one is feasible, which one is not feasible, present that as final drafts for
mm,
it to be questioned here and there. And this time, I think they can see a lot of difference in how this draft came out than what has been done previously. And then even in the national committee, you realize that there isn't even people with academic background. But then this time they brought in a couple of people. So that's how Professor Lamte was over there
Okay.
to sort of question, the drafts and all that. So I think now it's changing. I don't know how it was in the past, but I think now it's really, really evolving. I really like the points that Desmond brought out because I think researchers bring a different taste to it. And
Yeah.
it's actually incorporating like deep research to find out what is happening, especially at the grassroots. Because even with climate change and all that, I think one of the biggest group that has always been left out was the grassroots and people at the maybe economically lower level to be included in decision making. But I think now it's actually becoming part of it, and all because of research. So
Fantastic. Yeah.
definitely,
that's true.
yeah, that is really
That's true.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Desmond, we have to have you back because I think one of the things that we need to talk about is the payoffs.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
and in terms of things like very practical things like job security, and also even the payoffs of the different industries themselves, like academia
Right.
payoff,
Right.
industry payoff, and policy making payoff, and all
Right.
these things. It's been a nice time talking with you, Desmond, and thank you
Pleasure.
so
My
much
pleasure.
for being here with us, is for spending such a long time with us. What I'm doing now is I'm now reading a lot of technical reports because I think I can learn a lot about what I can
Yeah.
offer as a researcher
Yeah.
to the
Mhm.
conversation.
Exactly.
I read Ghana's report on climate change and I was like, no, there's a lot of things missing here and there and there. And I was like, how do they link this to that? And
Mm,
even Belgium's report, I still find gaps. There were a couple of gaps here and there. And so I think we these are some of the things that researchers,
Need
those
to.
in
Yeah.
academia, can really bring to the table here
right.
and there. But this is a conversation that we should definitely continue. But we're
Yeah.
going to give you a chance, Desmond, because you told a very long story about your how you got here, and looks like there are so many people that have been a blessing to you. Your dad encouraging you not to give up on science. Otherwise, you'll probably be some businessman somewhere. We don't know what to be selling here.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
shout
That's
out to anyone. Please feel free to just shout out to anyone who has been a
um
blessing to you. Yeah.
And
yeah.
be careful who you leave out.
Yeah. Be careful,
Because
please. Don't.
that's why I'm kind of like I took a very deep breath. Yeah, 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 of course. My parents will be the first one, obviously. They've been very, very instrumental. My dad, very, very instrumental, shaping me to become the man that I am today. So, of course, shout out to them. I'm very careful when it comes to name calling because then you end up not calling someone's name. But I'll just say all
It's okay.
the
You'll be back. You'll be back. Don't
my
worry.
lecturers in Ghana, China, and everyone. Yeah. So I'll be back. I'll think about it and kind of like maybe I'll come with a whole thesis of all everybody that I need to shout
Yes,
out.
yes.
But of course, I need to mention shout out to my beautiful, wonderful wife, Florence.
Woohoo!
That's
Yeah,
right.
she's been
Yeah.
amazing and a very strong pillar, by my side, and everything that I am today and I've achieved today, she's been very instrumental. So, of course, shout out to my beautiful wife and my two wonderful children to giving me the joy to keep fighting and keep going. Yeah. So
Yeah.
That's right.
maybe I'll just
That's
leave it
right.
there. they are
Yeah.
Before they
they
come
are
for
right
us.
next to me. So yeah, I know that nobody's gonna beat me here. But all the others far away, they can beat me. It's all right.
Yeah. But to
Yeah.
to all those who have made Desmond's story one that he can share, thank you. This podcast has benefited from your investment in him,
Mhm.
and so many listeners are going to be encouraged by that. Desmond, thank you so much, Dr. Desmond Ofosuenim. Thank you so much
Thank you guys
for
for having me.
saying yes to us and for spending your Saturday morning with us. And
Yeah,
listeners, well, so much to take in and so much to digest. So we're going to pause here and then hopefully have him come back again sometime
definitely happy
and
to.
then we'll continue our conversation. But we hope that you've learned something and that wherever you are, whether you are in academia or industry or policy making or you are thinking of any of them, you are seeing that
Yep.
everyone has their role to play. And feel free also to reach out to us or to Dr. Oswenim if you have questions. You have his contacts on the page, and we hope that we hear more from you. David, do you have anything to say?
No, I'm actually really excited about this episode and I really can't wait to hear the feedback on it. So
Awesome.
thank you, Dr. Desmond, again for your time and we really appreciate it. So
All right.
over to you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure.
And it was certainly a pleasure having you listening to us in this conversation. We hope you've learned a lot that will help you in your life or someone close to you. This has been the Green Living Chats podcast, special episodes on academia or industry. And we hope that you join us for other episodes on this podcast. But until then, keep living green.